Animes revolving around food is not uncommon. There have been many countless series that have made food one of the biggest factors of the story, and Delicious in Dungeon, also known as Dungeon Meshi, is no exception, and was produced by none other than Studio Trigger, which is a studio that you probably have heard of if you have watched series like Kill la Kill or Cyberpunk Edge Runners. And if you have watched any of those series, you would know that Trigger knows how to do animation, and all the visuals and everything that they do is always spectacular to see. But when I heard that this series was going to be adapted by Studio Trigger, I was kind of surprised considering what kind of animes they usually make. So seeing them being responsible for a series that at first seems to be just a typical slice of life cooking anime really piqued my interest. But as the series continues and the more episodes I watched, I realized that even though this is considered a slice of life cooking adventure anime, there is some dark elements that were very well done. And after watching this made me realize that this anime wasn't going to hold back, and that there's going to be some very dark and unsettling moments as we go through this journey. And how good it was subtle about it that when a dark moment happened, you were completely either caught off guard or extremely shocked to see what was happening. Because in the beginning of the story, it doesn't really seem to be anything terrifying. Sure, we do get moments in which we see how our main cast of characters, this being Laios, Marcel, Chilchuk, etc., being in an adventure group in which they go to the dungeon to do things that adventurers mostly do in these kind of stories. Except that in one day, when they were fighting a red dragon, one of their members, this being Laios' sister, Fallen, gets taken by a red dragon as she was trying to protect her brother. And after this event happened, not only did their adventure group disbanded after this incident, with only Laios, Marcel, and Chilchuk being determined to rescue Fallen from this red dragon. At first, it makes us believe that it's going to be a rescue mission into saving Laios' sister. And while we do get a few interesting moments along this journey when we see the unique personalities that each of our characters have, and later on Laios and his group will meet another character that will be pretty much essential to the story, this being a dwarf named Senshi, who not only seems to have a lot of knowledge of the dungeon, but is actually very good at cooking monsters, something that Laios seems to be very excited to see, as it will be revealed that Laios seems to have a craving for trying out how monsters taste like, despite him and Senshi being the only ones that have no problems eating the monsters. And that's pretty much what happens in the beginning of the story. We see our adventure group exploring this dungeon, taking down monsters, seeing new different kinds of things that happen in the dungeon, and learning more about this dungeon all throughout the way. And while in the back of our minds we're still thinking as to what is happening with Fallen and if everything is going to be okay, we are pretty much set to believe that everything is going to be fine. I mean, our main cast of characters are taking their time exploring this dungeon, so clearly nothing sinister is going to happen the deeper we go into this dungeon and the deeper we go to save Fallen from danger. That is the mindset that everyone, myself included, thought was going to be. But boy, were we wrong, as there will be one moment in particular that will not only be the turning point for this anime, but it will completely change how we view this anime and what's it really all about. Once Laios and his group encountered that red dragon again, the very same that they lost the first battle with, despite them seeming to be ready for this dragon once again, it's very obvious that this dragon isn't going to be a simple opponent and is going to be very tricky to take down. But eventually that would exactly be the case, as the red dragon would be defeated. And once the red dragon is dead, Laios will open up the dragon to see what's inside of it. And this will be the moment that would drastically change the series, as Laios will find the skull of a human. And while at first they weren't able to put the pieces together, eventually they will come to realize that this skull belongs to Fallen, making it very clear that at this moment Fallen died and was consumed by the dragon. In this moment, we got to see just how really dangerous this dungeon is, but also how this isn't going to be your typical slice of life, wholesome anime about just simply cooking. No, there's going to be more darker things to come, and that's what exactly be the case, as later on, when even though Fallen is dead, Marcel actually knows how to use dark magic. So they all come to the agreement that maybe if dark magic is used, there is a chance to revive Fallen and make her become once again human. Even though dark magic is considered very dangerous and not something that anybody should be doing, they go right along and use dark magic to revive Fallen. And at first, everything seems to be fine as Fallen is acting and behaving like she usually does, and it seems that the dark magic worked as Fallen is not only human again, but it seems that everything is going to be alright. But unfortunately, this will be far from the case, as even though we do spend a good time with Fallen and we do spend a good time with them all together, showing just how much of a good brother and sister relationship both Laios and Fallen have, and clearly just how much good of a relationship both Fallen and Marcel have, it seems that everything is going to be okay. But that will be far from the case, as another threat will come along the way to disrupt the peace, and this is a character that goes by a name of Lunatic Magician, in which it will be revealed that this person seems to be in charge of the dungeon and controls how this dungeon functions. And we will not only see just how much of a menace this Lunatic Magician is, but we will see them being able to not only control Fallen but turn her into a chimera, thus making her be against Laios and the rest of the group. And this is where the tone slightly changes, as at this point it's no longer just simply a rescuing mission. Sure, now they have to once again save Fallen, but now they have to also take care of this threat, this of course being the Lunatic Magician. Something that is easier said than done, but it does greatly show just how much Laios is determined to save his sister no matter what needs to be done or what he has to do. While he may be seen as somebody who clearly isn't the brightest person and does a lot of very outlandish or some very unusual things throughout their journey in this dungeon, it does show us the kind of person Laios is. He's a caring brother that is willing to do anything to make sure that his sister is safe and sound. And when they reunite with an old member of their group, this being Shuro, in which we will come to find out that while he did not show any intentions of trying to help and rescue Fallen, it seems that now he has completely changed his mind, as now he has his own group who is also trying to find where Fallen is. But of course, this creates some turmoil, as once he sees what happened to Fallen in a battle that ensues that shows that Fallen is now a dangerous creature that doesn't show any hesitation of just simply attacking them and causing so much chaos and destruction. And even though this battle did seem to be a losing one, and it seemed that everyone was going to lose their lives, Fallen Chimera decides to just simply run away and not do any more destruction. But this wouldn't be the end of the entire conflict, as when Shuro comes to find out that black magic was used to resurrect Fallen, he is beyond angry and he condemns Marcel for using dark magic, and also condemned Laios for not taking this seriously and believing that he was taking all this as a one big joke, when that wasn't the case, because during their fight between Laios and Shuro, in which obviously things are tensing up, Laios will once again cement just how much he is taking this seriously, but in his own way. But despite all these insane dark moments, the series still has its moments where everything is just silly, and there's just still a lot of funny moments with Laios and his group. And normally this wouldn't work, as it would just seem like something that's being forced, or it just wouldn't make sense to have these very intense moments and then later on have these wacky adventures like everything is okay and nothing is happening. But I think what this is trying to demonstrate is that despite everything, all the chaos, all the terrifying things that all these characters have had to go through, there's still moments that you can still be able to appreciate everything that's around you and still be able to enjoy the life that you have. Don't get me wrong, I'm pretty sure the average person, if they were ever in a situation like this, exploring a dungeon that they probably have no idea of all the secrets and all the unknown things that are happening, would be terrifying and would want to escape as soon as possible. That is just how the world is. There's going to be beautiful places, but there's also going to be places that you probably wouldn't want to go. But unfortunately, you have to acknowledge that these places do exist and are places that are part of the world, whether we like it or not. Which just makes the world building of Delicious in Dungeon amazing to see. Whether there are places that are beautiful or places that are just terrifying, it's always interesting to see what this world has. But despite everything I just said, this dungeon is still a very terrifying place, and if you're not careful, the dungeon is going to affect you not just physically but mentally as well. And this is what we get to see when we learn about Senshi's past. At one point, the group encounters a griffin, and when Senshi sees this, he becomes fearful and just wants to get away from the monster. And while he for a while is separated from the group, once they're reunited, the group wants to know why Senshi was so scared of that griffin. And while he was hesitant, Senshi would tell him about the story of what not only he had to go through, but what happened with his original group. As it turns out, Senshi as well as other members were exploring the dungeon, but due to him not knowing the full extent of the dungeon, they became lost very quickly. And at that point, it no longer became an exploration or discovering new things. It just became survival, trying to figure out where the exit of the dungeon is and how they were going to survive due to them having limited food, and not to mention how a griffin was suddenly attacking them and targeting them one by one. This becomes a very intense and emotional moment where we see Senshi struggling to survive and having to witness one by one his own people being killed by the griffin. Mix that in with the isolation of not being able to see the outside world, and with the last remaining members' relationship becoming more intense as the days go by, it's no wonder why Senshi was so traumatized in this part of his life. And as if things couldn't get even more worse, one argument between the last two remaining members ended with one of them only ending up coming back, which of course implies that this argument got so heated that only one of them survived after this argument. And once all was settled, Senshi was given a soup that was considered to be griffin soup. However, Senshi did not really know the taste of it and wondered if this really was griffin soup. He wouldn't find out the answer to this, as at that point he was all alone and he pretty much had to survive all on his own. Pretty much he was the last remaining member of his group, and while it did take some time, eventually he would find an exit and escape the dungeon. But instead of going back home, he decided to still keep exploring the dungeon, and that's all that he's been doing for a big part of his life. But despite Senshi surviving that whole series of events, he is still traumatized of everything he went through. And of course, one of the biggest ones is that soup that he ate, as he still has no idea what he ate that day, and he is very scared of finding out what he actually ate. But it wouldn't be until Laios informs him that what he ate may not have been griffin soup. It may have been something completely different and not something that he was actually thinking. And once he listens to this, he decides to confront his past head on. And once he tastes this version of the soup, that not only was it not griffin soup or what he thought, but it was a completely different creature. This makes Senshi relieved and he bursts out crying, being happy that he finally is able to move on and not be haunted from those memories long ago. It's these moments that made me realize that this isn't just a cooking anime, it's an eating anime. And what I mean by that, if you see Senshi's and Laios' interest in monsters and eating them, it isn't just simply maybe because they are just some very weird individuals. It could be that they both realize that it's essential to eat what you have, because going into the dungeon, you don't know what's going to happen. Even if one has traveled this dungeon numerous times, it doesn't mean that it's always going to be the same. There's always going to be something different or something unusual going on the deeper you go and the farther you go into this dungeon. And pretty much being able to survive and being able to just simply having the energy to keep going is why it's important to eat what you have and not really be picky about it. As when you are exploring this dungeon, you never truly know if you're going to live to see another day. But overall, Dungeon Meshi was a very surprising anime to see. I didn't really think too much of this series when watching it, but now after watching all the episodes, it really made me interested in the story, and I'm very curious to see what's going to happen in the near future, as it was announced very quickly that a season 2 is in development. And since this story is already completed, most likely the next season is going to probably adapt all the remaining chapters to conclude this story. And judging from the many dark moments that we've seen in these past episodes, I'm not going to be surprised that there's going to be even more darker moments along the way. But that is is something we have to wait and see. So hopefully you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time.